Welcome to Speak Out. I'm Sandy Galef, a member of the New York State Assembly, representing parts of Northern Westchester and parts of Putnam Valley. And today we're going to be talking about education in the state of New York, how important it is, the new programs that have been developed, and trying to deal with change in our state. And I am so happy to have the Honorable Regent Judith Johnson with me today, and she's newly appointed, well, it's been about 4 months, to the Regents, and also had been the former superintendent of schools in Peekskill. Judith, I'm so happy to have you here. We are so glad, my colleagues in the Westchester and the region, Putnam and Rockland and so on, to have you as our regent. Tell us what it's like to be in the Regents. I think there are there 17 of them?
Yes, 17 of us. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I know that these are very interesting times in education in New York State. It's probably one of the most exciting times one could be a member of the Board of Regents. We are not thinking like a body of 17. We have diverse opinions, diverse perspectives on how to move forward. We have inherited, those of us who are new, as well as those who still remain on the Board of Regents, a series of challenges that have been posed by our constituents, primarily teachers, parents, and I will tell you, students. And you're right, this is all a period of change, and I think that while change has been introduced many times in New York State, this appears to be the most contentious that I can recall in my recent history.
Why do you think it's so? Are just people speaking out more? You know, maybe 30 years ago people didn't critique as much about education, or?
First of all, I've met with so many people, and I've met with students. And the one comment that I often make is, isn't it great to be an American and have the opportunity to speak out on behalf of an issue, whether you wish to support it or oppose it? And let's make sure our students understand that's how a democracy survives, by ensuring that your voices are heard. So from that perspective, I'm really pleased that there's been a debate out there. But now you ask the question, what is the debate? And it's a little difficult to unpack that, but I would suggest that people question the introduction of the Common Core standards because we didn't do a really good enough job of explaining to them that this is not a national curriculum. There's great opposition to the concept of a national
Of something being done all across America, right.
There's a real serious opposition to that. I think even more important, however, is the fact that there are new assessments. Now, we have tested students for years, decades, and there's never been a backlash against testing. Except for the past year.
Did people forget that?
Yes.
We've kind of forgotten it?
Yes, because now the tests have consequences for teachers.
Right.
They don't have consequences for students, not until, I think, 2022, which is a contradiction unto itself. If it has no consequence for a student, why does it have a consequence for a teacher? But when you get a sense of what the test items look like, and that's very difficult because the test items have not been released for public scrutiny.
And that's also a problem, right? That is a huge problem.
Huge issue. What we have learned, however, is that the level of rigor, the level of challenge was unexpected. And the cry teachers have is that they didn't have the time to teach the students to the new standards that are embedded in the test items. And the parents are saying, what are these modules? They're so different from how we went to school. We can't help our children with homework. But the most important part, I think, is that there are now high stakes attached to these assessments. And there's a great deal of controversy over the high stakes.
And that means that the teachers have a stake as to whether they're going to remain as teachers, and their anxiety, I would assume, after having been a former teacher, and you too, that you are anxious, and probably that anxiety leads itself down to the students, and the students to the parents, or the teacher to the parents. And so you just have a whole group of, all the people that are interested in education are anxious, I would assume.
Actually, I've had this great opportunity to meet with students in New York City, small groups, and students in Monroe Woodbury. Now, granted, they were handpicked. They're brilliant. It gives you hope when you talk to these students because they understand the political environment. A 12-year-old middle school student said, I chose not to take the test because I don't want my teacher to lose her job because of my test score. That's pretty powerful. Now, they had to hear that from the teacher and perhaps from their parents, but the students understand there are stakes attached to this. And the students that I spoke with loved their teachers and loved school. So they felt the entire institution's been threatened by the introduction of these tests that now have consequences. Now, one might ask in the audience out there, what's wrong with using teacher test scores to measure teacher effectiveness? Because I really want to get this point across. The test items themselves were never developed to measure teacher effectiveness. In any science, you don't use an item for which it was not intended.
What were they intended to be used for?
They were intended to, my guess is they were intended to determine whether or not students were acquiring the critical thinking skills that are embedded in the Common Core standards.
Right, and then to show that they have advanced from year to year to year.
I don't know that we can even show that yet, because I
Right.
don't think that the way in which the test has been designed allows you to show growth over time, because we don't know whether there's any reliability to these test items, which is why I think someone wisely said, let's not apply these test scores to a student's promotion standards for until at least the year 2022. We need to know a whole lot more about them. I will tell you that the way in which the items are scored is also problematic, because it's based on an assumption that students in like groups score in common ways. And there is no like group. You can be, I'll take high poverty school districts. The conditions that lead to poverty do vary from school district to school district. Even more importantly, the way in which students respond to adverse conditions vary from school district to school district. Some students have the perseverance to overcome it, others don't. All of that shows up in a test score. So if a teacher doesn't really have control over the social and economic conditions that frame a child's life, and we know that those conditions can affect a test score, we're asking the teacher to be rated on conditions over which he or she have no control.
Right.
And that is a very serious issue. It's not that the tests don't have some validity in terms of whether or not there's rigor to them, although there are questions about that. And I don't have a study that would suggest to me that there is validity to the rigor. But the concern is that when you measure teacher effectiveness, there are many conditions that you need to look at, and many conditions over which teachers have no control. So how do you put an evaluation system in place where 50% of the test score of the teacher's evaluation is based on a test score?
Right. And that's what the governor had recommended. We modified it. We actually, I believe that we sent the decision to the Board of Regents to try to figure out how we're going to do this testing and how we're going to evaluate the teachers. I mean, my thought was that when you evaluate a teacher, you have a baseline. I think it's like evaluating anything. You have a baseline, and then you have to hope that every year that child advances. But you have to do it on a child-by-child basis, I would assume, versus a class would change. One of the problems with the test, you do the test in the spring, you don't get the results, and so you're really dealing with another class in the fall. And how do you do that? I don't know how you do that kind of comparison, because it really is based on the individual student, I would think. I don't know how,
You can't do that comparison. There are a number of flaws that are embedded in this current teacher evaluation system, and a group of us have identified the flaws. I think you can recall that now sitting on the Board of Regents are 5 former superintendents.
Right.
So we come right from the field, having experienced the implications and the outcomes of looking at the validity and reliability of any test items. You asked earlier, why wasn't there a backlash in previous years? Because we didn't tie those test scores to teacher evaluation. We did tie them to, is a school district demonstrating that the students are improving over time? And those were not like groups, by the way, but third grade to third grade.
Right, because we used to even see that in the paper they put together.
Right.
This school, that school, and I'd look at them and I'd say, but the kids are different in the different schools. It's a little hard even to compare that. So
that's a serious issue that hasn't been addressed yet. There should be a way to monitor a student's progress as he or she moves through school. One, we have not figured out how to do that, and two, I'm not sure that that's much of a measure of teacher effectiveness. I'd like to bring this out. I've had so many opportunities to meet with people, And I met recently with the Westchester Putnam School Boards Association, their annual dinner. And prior to the dinner, they completed a survey. And one of the questions on the survey, what do you see to be the 3 most important pressing issues for the Board of Regents? And the answers were very telling. Teacher evaluation, the validity of the test items, and the third one was children in poverty. Now, these are many wealthy school districts who were completing this, in addition to high-need school districts. To a district, they saw children in poverty to be one of the 3 most important issues we need to address. And I would like to say to the audience, that's the elephant in the room that we have not really addressed. That needs to be at the table, the very same table that we sit at when we discuss educational outcomes.
And we do talk about that a lot, when we're doing our funding for schools, and, talking about that whole campaign for fiscal equity, which was based on trying to steer more state dollars into schools that had more poverty. But we also have the issue now of schools. The governor had talked about receivership. We, tried to amend that to give, I think there are 27 schools that are not doing well in the state, but to give them a chance with more resources to try to pick themselves up, and you agonize over it because you know that there are children in a classroom that are not doing well and may not do as well in life because of where they are. So,
but what a wonderful opportunity to shine the spotlight on a comprehensive approach to poverty. I agree with you, they should not be called failing schools. They've had poor performance for decades because of the conditions that surround the school environment itself. But if we really want to invest in reducing the impact of poverty and give kids an opportunity to enter adulthood no longer poor, then we need a comprehensive approach. And giving these school buildings additional funds and resources allows us to put in place a pilot. Can we do this well? And it costs a great deal more. We have to be willing to make that investment. Otherwise, we're kidding ourselves. We're not going to see any difference. It's the investment in the total child that needs to take place if you want this school to be a turnaround school. I think it's really important. I would like to see this done in a very positive way and not in a punitive way. I'd like to shine the light on those schools and make sure they get all the resources they need, and I'd like the narrative told. Here's what we learned from this.
Right.
Yeah. So it could be an opportunity for New York State to pause and examine whether or not we have always done a good job with educating poor children. I would suggest no. But 2, maybe this is the time to say, let's look at this differently. Let's bring more resources into these schools and try to ensure that. I am very concerned about the fact that 6 out of every 10 children born into poverty enter adulthood still poor.
So you were talking about the School Boards Association of Westchester Putnam coming to you with those 3 qualifications, which is interesting. Common Core, I didn't hear you say that.
No,
exactly.
No, it really was. In fact, it was very interesting. I'll tell you what they said about Common Core in a minute. Nope, teacher evaluation, the assessment system, which is related to teacher evaluation, but it's also a result of their frustration with the items themselves, and children in poverty. Okay, so there was a question asked, are you familiar enough with Common Core to be able to describe it? And I don't remember the percentage, but more than half of those responding said yes. So I said to the audience, I forgot to ask you, do you support it? I just asked whether or not you understood it. But it's really important for me to know they understand it. And I don't think there's anyone who would argue with me about the embedded critical thinking skills that reflect Common Core. And Common Core is not a curriculum, and that's another problem. People are translating it into teaching to the test. Done well, you are not teaching to the test. You're teaching students to acquire those higher order critical thinking skills, analyzing, critical thinking, application of knowledge, project-based learning, taking all the knowledge that's available to me and using it in productive ways and in new ways. And now you're saying, are there test items that see whether or not they've acquired these skills? One of the problems I have with the way the assessments are currently constructed is that you don't need a paper and pencil test or a fill in the bubble. What you really need are projects. And there are schools who have waivers that Tom Sobel gave them.
That was a long time ago.
They still have the waivers. And I visited those schools just 2 weeks ago. And to graduate from any one of those high schools, you have to produce a portfolio. And it's a rigorous presentation that you've been working on for 4 years. And you take one Regents exam, the English exam, everyone takes that. And then they have to invest in a set of learnings with an S. And that culminates with these incredible projects that they have produced. Now you know that the students coming out of these schools understand that learning and acquiring knowledge has purpose and meaning. It's not just for development.
Let me ask you something then. So they still have waivers. So what happens with them and all this assessment and
they don't really know yet.
Okay.
And I want to protect them because I think they're doing really great work down there. So one of the reasons why I did visit the schools because I was asking that very same question: how will you accommodate these new conditions in your system? And while we don't have them fully answered that yet, the waiver does not require them to administer Regents exams beyond the English exam. So they have their own set of approved assessments that they use that they feel more adequately reflect critical thinking.
Do you think that's kind of a direction that the Regents, we need to go to have diversity in how we're getting to the goal line within each of our schools instead of having this across the board, everybody has to do this, that, and the other thing?
Absolutely. There are a number of us who sit on the Board of Regents who feel that if districts want to present their own plan for program and teacher evaluation, if they can show us rigor, flexibility, validity, if they can show us how they evaluate their work on an ongoing basis and how they use the data, then they should be given the right to use those plans. And we are proposing that. We have no idea whether we have sufficient votes to get that approved, but we're going to propose that. There has to be a rigorous evaluation system. It needs to offer promise for other school districts. And I am not in any way suggesting that every school district can suddenly shift to portfolio assessments. That takes time.
Right.
But what it does say is that you can look at other models and come up with something that has meaning for your own community and that demonstrates that students have acquired and can apply the knowledge. We want that to be an integral part of this teacher evaluation system.
I know you've been going out and having a lot of listening tours. I actually went to one in Ardsley. Early on, you get appointed to be a member of the Regent. You went through all of our interviews and everything. We're so happy that you were doing it. And then you started out reaching out to the public to find out what people were thinking. And you've been doing a lot of that.
Oh my goodness, I think I have actually attended and been invited to over 12 forums, anywhere from 20 to 200 people. And in fact, just yesterday evening, I met with 100 teachers in a place called Slate Hill, New York, which is part of Orange County.
Okay.
And I thought, there are two advantages to this. I have no idea what Slate Hill is, so I made sure that I was driven there. And two, I get to see beautiful countryside while I travel through. And I met a wonderful group of teachers who, I will say this, teachers are becoming more outspoken. They're so angry. They're so incredibly angry that they're now coming out. Whether it's a small group, Ken Zabrowski, who was an assembly person in New City, had, I think, 20 teachers in his office on a Friday evening. I thought, there'll be no one there. I was stunned when I walked in and saw the teachers. And they had just a week before held a huge forum for Rockland County teachers, where there were, I would say, over 200 people. People are coming out because they're angry, and they feel like their voices have not been heard. And all they're saying, if I were to distill this down to one major issue, is do not use a student test score to evaluate my worth when you have no proof that the test score is a measure of my worth.
So Judith, do you think we'll get beyond, because I feel it too in my office, we get a lot of emails, we get a lot of calls, I talk to people on the phone, been to meetings, and I feel the protests and so on. But there is a point where we're going to go beyond the protests. Everybody speaks out in their feeling, and then try to go forward with, what we do positively. And I know you're under a lot of pressure with a time frame that we had in the budget process. We tried to negotiate a lot of things. We won on some, and we didn't win on others, I must say. But there are some time frames. And I don't know whether you're going to be able, with the regents, to try to figure out a way to move those time frames somewhat. So it gives us time to get a good plan in place, so that hopefully at the end of the day we don't have all these protests, that people have really kind of bought into it, and this is the direction we might be going, with lots of exceptions. Do you think we'll get there, or are people just going to continue to, be angry all the way through?
I think that if we do not make changes in the language and expectations that are embedded in the budget bill language, that we haven't seen the amount of anger that can be.
More to come.
I think there's more to come. I think, though, it's very important for your public to understand that no one region can make the difference, that there are 17 members on the Board of Regents, and there has been in the past unanimous votes. That's not going to happen, we're pretty sure, going forward. But unless a majority of the members of the board agree to a proposal, all we become are vocal minority voices. So do we think that this system needs time to be developed? Absolutely. We have proposed in a set of 6 essential amendments that we have minimal disruption to school districts in the upcoming year while we figure this out. And everyone has advised us that the governor will probably not be pleased with that. But I think as policymakers, we need to take a stand.
Right.
And we understand the significance of policy. And we also understand that when you create policy, you need to try to think about unintended consequences. And try as policymakers and as educators to figure out what's likely to happen as a result of this policy. And you can't get them all. So you need a year of implementation to discover what the unintended consequences are. So we hope that we can get people to hear what we're trying to say. No one is saying we can't have an accountability system. No one is saying we must allow ineffective teachers to remain. We're not saying that at all. We're saying let's build this system in a way that has integrity. And let's take the year to do that. And let's bring in experts and practitioners to assist us. And let's get public feedback as we go along. And that doesn't mean that we're going to do everything the public agrees to. I think the other piece that's very important for people to understand is at least educate the public. And I've said to the many groups that I've spoken with, you're not going to always like the stand that I take, but I promise you, I will explain why I've taken the stand.
And I think that that's so important. And I think for probably a long time, maybe the regents weren't out enough. I mean, this is a really tough job. You maybe you had no idea exactly what
I
you
thought
were
I was going to be a
into.
scholar, I think I'm going to retreat to reading great books, and pondering over how this fits into a school curriculum. I was going to have a lot of fun.
Right.
I was simply going into the academic world. No, I don't think so.
This is a real time of challenge.
I'm so pleased to be in this position, and I'm so grateful that the Assembly selected me as the regent, because as I move around, I'm hearing from people, and they're grateful to all of you that you picked an educator to sit in that seat. I can't tell you how grateful they are.
Right.
I've heard it over and over again.
Right. It's so interesting when you looked at the regents in the past. So often it hasn't been somebody that's been in the educational system that had to produce a budget, that had to do the testing, that had to, deal with parents and issues and so on. So, it's really wonderful.
It's important that there be a mixture of people. I do think it's important to have doctors sitting on the Board of Regents and to have architects and construction folks and lawyers sitting there, but I think you can't do this without educators offering the voice of practice. And I think combining that, you come out with some of the best decisions likely to be needed.
So in addition to you having meetings that people can attend, there are a lot of public meetings that you have. How do people, they can go to Regents meetings, they can come to Albany and be at a Regents meeting, they can reach out to you. I know you get like thousands of emails.
Hundreds of emails. And some people will fax me in the Board of Regents office. So those are a number of ways in which to reach me. I think the 2 best ways is to either email me, and I understand we're going to show that email address on the screen, or actually, and I don't have this number with me, call the Board of Regents. There are 2 wonderful people there who take the messages and make sure that we get them really almost immediately. And they help us to schedule when people ask for me or another member of the Board of Regents to appear someplace. We work out the schedule. So that's those are two probably the best ways in which to reach me.
And of course, I would assume that you'd really like to hear ideas from people, progressive change, whatever, not just reiterating, maybe in the first paragraph, but really giving you some ideas about where to go. Because I keep telling teachers that's the best thing. You're in the classroom, and you know what's going on, and best to present some good ideas.
And they have some really good ideas, and they feel that, one, in the past, no one has asked them, and that's unfortunate. And two, when they speak out as they've begun to do, no one listens. So that's why, for me, this is a very, very active judicial district. It's Judicial District 9. And I think it's probably, if not the first, the second wealthiest school district, probably has the greatest number of well-educated residents. So we've got a group of concerned citizens who are not going to sit back.
No.
And I really do enjoy that. I do really enjoy that. And so the conversations are mutually respectful. And I will have to say that as angry as people are, they have been very respectful in the conversations I've had with them. I just can't promise them how this is going to end at this point.
Well, it's interesting because the meeting I went to when you were there in Ardsley, and you were asking people, I think they were talking about the opt-out and the kids not taking the test, and you were saying, what is your goal?
Yes.
What is your goal? And I think sometimes we don't think necessarily about where we want to end it, but we just want to say we don't like what it is. And I think that's why they're opting out. They just have the frustration
It's
is
the
there.
frustration. But it is important. I think if you recall, I said the issue of civil disobedience needs to have an outcome. And what's your intended outcome? And I gave them a little history lesson about civil disobedience in the past, because I wanted them to think about that. What is it that you want? We're not going to eliminate testing. First of all, the federal government's not going to eliminate testing on an annual basis, even as they think about reauthorizing what will no longer be called No Child Left Behind. It will have a new name. They have not eliminated the annual testing. But the kind of testing that is used, the length, the duration that is involved for a student taking the test, the quality of the items, that's all state-based. And it is possible that if we get this right, you don't need 6 days of testing to get a snapshot of what a student knows and is able to do. So the Pearson contract is up for renewal. I have no idea what
when is that? Is that this year?
It's up on the district's website, and on the state's website, rather. And I don't know what the closing date is, and I have no idea who besides Pearson has responded to the RFP. But it is up there for it. And my concern is, quite frankly, that there are not many companies out there willing to take on the challenges that exist in New York State at this time. But I would say this, that if they do end up winning the bid, there will be some serious negotiations about what's in that contract.
Right. So we have a lot of new things on that point, and as we end, we have a new commissioner of education, and who will start fairly soon, July 6th. And lots going on in New York State. And Judith, I just want to thank you so much for agreeing to be a regent. And we're very proud that you're there, happy that you're there, and we encourage everybody in the audience to express their views and or to read up and let us know what their ideas are.
Don't sit back. It's really important. This is probably a critical time in public education in New York State.
It's
weigh in.
Right. Thank you so much. Do weigh in. If you need to talk with me, I'm at 914-941-1111. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.